My name is Vladislav Solovjov. So today I'm going to talk about 3 simulation tools for stylish boutique scenes in Cinema 4D. So those are my credentials. So if you'd like to follow my work, the website and Instagram are there. So just a little bit of bio about who I am, what I do. I'm a creative director and artist, currently based in London, UK. So I have like 15 years of experience in CGI, design, animation, and my primary tool has been Cinema 4D, I think starting from 2009. So it's been ages, long time ago, and the software has progressed so much. Now it's just a completely different software for me. So my clients are Google, Apple, Audi, Lotus, Maxon, blah, blah, blah. So a couple of, big names. So for those who has been using Cinema 4D for some time, you might have seen the splash screen, which I designed back in 2022. So thanks to the Maxon for giving me this opportunity to rise and shine and showcase my work for 1 year on this splash screen. And I'm going to show you a very quick show reel I decided to put together for this amazing conference, just to showcase you what I do.
Okay.
Thank you. So, like I say, everything you could just see on the screen was made right in Cinema 4D with Redshift and with a few bits of X particles. But now it's mostly Cinema 4D because Cinema 4D has some pretty cool simulation tools which are GPU based, so you have quite nice and solid performance. Another note, everything I just showed was made on a laptop, which is quite an unusual way of working because usually everybody uses like the full tower, maybe Mac Studio. In my case, as I traveled a lot, like performance on my lap is very important to me, so I could just literally hook up my laptop, connect it to some power socket, and just continue working. So for a long time, doing CG, I collaborated with different markets. In my case now, I work with IT, science, beauty and fashion, sports, automotive and film industries. So I kind of really like the experiments and to see how far I can get and what else I can do. It's always like a very nice and fresh experiment to me anytime I work with a new client. Moreover, I really love textures, surfaces, and play of lights. And this is perhaps 3 key ingredients I try to reflect in my work every time I create something, either for myself or for a client. So very quick images. I'm going to show you a couple of like mood boards I created for the show. This one is about reflections and refractions. Some of these pictures you could see in my show reel. This one is about metal, like precious metals, like gold, bronze, like platinum, some very cool distortion elements. This one is more about crystals, any like crazy subsurface scattering that could be reflected in materials or like refracted through the materials and objects. This is what I also love to do. And of course the bubbles. The Cinema 4D splash screen was about bubbles, and it just happened that I have so many spheres in my portfolio, so I decided to dedicate one single slide for the spheres. Why not? So here we have aberrations, more reflections, and one of these scenes I will show you how that was done in Cinema 4D. very quickly, one of more experiments I did for myself where I just wanted to create a sphere and to see how many things I can put in one single glass sphere. So in my case, there was something organic, something metallic, some particles, liquids, twisted metals, etc. So here we have the particles. All this particle work also was designed and simulated in Cinema 4D. And we also have smoke. So now Cinema 4D also can do smoke. We have pyro. I will also touch base on pyro as well and show you a couple of very nice experiments. And liquid. I haven't tested like many things with liquids in Cinema 4D, but the version 2024 and 2025, if you take the standard settings of the particle simulation tool and slightly play around with it, you can get quite close to the liquids-like simulation-ish. And how about the real-time demo? We are here actually to do something in Cinema 4D. So I'm going to show you how we can make this on the laptop. So in this scene, we have maybe 10 million particles, maybe 10 million. We can get even crazier. This is one of the images that I showed before. This is like the cloth simulation, which was combined with some cool reflection elements like gradients, HDRI maps, which I created just for myself from scratch. Another one, we will also talk about the ropes. I love ropes because you can twist them, you can make knots, you can simulate hair. So there are many cool opportunities what you can achieve with Cinema 4D. All right, and now we jump into Cinema 4D. So the first one we'll talk about the particles. So there is a scene I made maybe a couple of days ago, and we have basically the pyro. So I will just disable all the emitters here. I will try to play the pyro. So we have a simulation like this, which was simulated literally in 10 seconds. And this also was cached as a VDB sequence, just locally on a laptop. And we now can use this pyro objects as an advection source for our particles. So if I hide the pyro objects completely from the camera and activates the particles, this is what we're gonna get. It looks pretty interesting here. I know, as you can see, the performance is pretty good just for one single laptop. In my case, I'm on M4 Max with 48 gigs of unified memory. I will just show you the performance. So we have 48 gigs and we still have 10 left. So basically I have the particle simulation scene opens in Cinema 4D. I have the cloth simulation, which is in this tag. There's one more tag here, one more scene with ropes. So I have 3 scenes already cached in memory, and we still have 10 gigs left. So which is pretty good for simulation, animation, and rendering. All right, so I'm gonna save this scene because you never know. So I'm gonna play it one more time. I will show you what you can achieve also with Redshift and lighting. All right, so how about we go to Redshift, to this setting first. I rendered the image for the presentation in 4K. I will just go to 720p, just to speed up the rendering in IPR. All right, so we go to render view. This is the scene with ropes. I'm gonna show it a bit later. All right, so here we have the scene like with 10 million particles. It's already simulated, cached, but I can also later show you how you can do this from scratch. I have another scene. So we can even take the camera, we can fly around. As you can see, we have some God rays happening in the scene. You can get closer, we can fly around to the object and see all these beautiful details, which is pretty powerful. You can also slightly improve the speed of rendering just by disabling the Redshift environment. Redshift environment generates volumetric lights for all your light sources. So if I just switch it off, we'll get some significant boost in rendering. We can get back to our camera, which has some really nice and beautiful bokeh. So go to the optical settings. In my case, I used just something pretty standard. So you can go to the bladed or circular. By default, it's circular, but I decided to give it some really nice filmic look. So now I have hexagonal shape in bokeh. So if I just zoom in, take the region render like this, and we go to our rendering settings, and we can increase the progressive passes. I'll usually go slightly lower, but we can go slightly higher to show you how it looks. And there are like many settings of how you can control the anisotropic effect. You can make it look more anamorphic. And the anamorphic look would be controlled with the aspect ratio of your bokeh. You can stretch it vertically, horizontally, and achieve very cool effects in Cinema 4D. Getting back to the Redshift environment, if we activate this, and we'll try to render this image, let's say in 1080p, just to check the performance, how it works. I will go to the rendering settings. I'll pause the render view. We'll go to like this. It will take a second just to refresh the preview, because 10 million particles is no joke. Then we go to the bucket rendering, this one, and let's see how it goes. By default, the bucket size is 128. However, you can increase the speed of rendering by going up to 512. While it's rendering, I'll show you the setting. So if you jump to Redshift settings, you go to System, you can see the buckets rendering on your right-hand side. So by default, it's 128. You can go to 512. And that's the setting that will help you to achieve quite a faster rendering. So let's have a look. It's already 66%, 75. So it goes pretty fast. All right, perfect. So it took us 41 seconds just to render one single frame, which is absolutely amazing for this scene, which has 100 frames. So basically, in 1 hour and a half, you can just render this sequence pretty quickly for social media, for work, etc. So this is the one. I'm going to pause it. I'll show you another one, and later I'll show you also how you can create something like this from scratch. All right. So I will close this scene for a moment. I'll go to Clove. This is the one. So I'll also explain why we have the Alembic files here, not just the cache simulation, but rather something like this. So the animation looks like this. It's pretty heavy because of the geometry. So if I disable this, I'll slightly zoom out. You'll see it literally looks like this. Just piece of cloth, like just disk, with all the distortions, simulation. This is the effect we get. However, if you just use the simulation objects without baking, you won't be able to apply deformers. You could, but usually I try to use the Alembic files mostly because you can also adjust the speed. Imagine if you simulated the scene and you feel like it's too fast, it's too quick. You can bake it as an Alembic file, and then you can just control the speed. So by default, it was 100, and this is how it looks. I didn't like the states of these objects, so I went back to 25, and now I thought, all right, maybe we can have fun, a bit more fun with this. I put some twists. That looks pretty cool. But I had a feeling that we had some very strange and sharp edges, so if you put smoothing on top, It will help you to smooth out the geometry. So you literally like iron your shirts. This is what you get. So we have like different camera setups. This is the first one. So if I go to the keynote, so this is one frame, second frame, and the third. So basically we have 3 camera setups in one single scene. So if I go to frame 40, for example, go to the settings, go down to 720p, and take a look at the render view just to see how fast it could render. We need just IPR view. All right, this is how it looks. What I like about Redshift is that you can actually fake some lighting. You don't need to actually create area lights. You can just use rather geometry with some textures put on top, and you will have even more flexibility in controlling the area lights. In my case, what I decided to do, so I have 3 different lighting setups. By default, this is how it looks. If I go to the first setup, this is what we can get. Cool. We also, so we have the dome light here, and we need to apply the same shader on top of this. You know what? I think I can even create this lighting setup from scratch. Why do I need to show you like all of this? We'll just delete all of that. We don't need it. You go to the Redshift render view. This is what we get. Basically, I took the dome lights and went to details and disabled everything because I just wanted to have white backgrounds combined with other dome light elements. So we go to another dome lights. Now it casts reflections, but it's just one bland, white color. We want some flavors. So we go to the settings and hit the add graph. Now we have a custom graph shader made for the dome lights, and this is where we can have some fun. I go to the settings and select Simmer 4D shader, connect it to the general dome lights, and now you can have some custom shaders here. You can create the gradients like this, where now you are capable of controlling the reflections which affects your objects. So it's like literally moving the softboxes in the studio. Very nice, but however, we're still lacking some reflections. It's because we now have just one single dome light. What I can do here is to close this too for a moment. I create the disk. We're going to flip it. So that would be facing the camera. Increase the number of polygons to 64. And then we go to the outer radius, which would be 200. And now we can just simply move it like this. So we just move it away from the camera. And we now can put the shader on top of the one single disk, which will render some reflections for us. So now we can see the reflection which actually appears in the center of this cloth simulation object. And now we can simply move the lighting objects like this. That's pretty cool. However, now we can see that the disk actually obstructs the camera. So in Redshift, we can actually hide it from camera. We apply the Redshift object tag and go to override settings and make it be only visible in the secondary array, which would be the reflections, refractions, diffuse, but we want to hide it from camera. Boom. Now we'll no longer see the disk in the camera. So the next step would be where you can now even increase the size of it. Let's say the radius would be 500. like that. We save the scene. And now we have some cool reflection. However, we still lock in light here. It's too dark. We can just duplicate it pretty quickly and move it to this side like this. That's pretty cool. It feels like the disk is too big, it's too large, it covers too much of the area. You can simply make it thinner, longer like this, and you just move it in a position you're happy with. Now we have the reflection here in this area. We have some, casted reflections from the geometry. And that's pretty cool. Now we can go to another camera. This is what we have. All right, another camera. But with this camera, you can see it's too dark. What we can do, we can just put all the disks, the area lights, how I call them, inside the null object. And you now can control all the lights in one go, like this. And it's pretty quick and efficient in Redshift because you don't use area lights. If you know that your scene will have only reflections like bottles, like perfume, you don't need some heavy area lights. You can actually fake a lot with just this technique. That's pretty useful. Alrighty, the second scene, I think already the third, would be the ropes. It will take a moment because the scene is quite heavy. Beautiful, now we have the ropes. It looks pretty organic and messy. What we can do is to go to the Redshift settings. Yet again, we go down to 720p. And let's have a look at this scene, what we can achieve with just some simple manipulations. This is how it looks. So here, what we have the rope simulation, which was baked as an Alembic file. I'll show you how you can bake it in one single click. And we have the volume measure builder. The volume measure builder is a pretty cool tool. I personally use it a lot because it can create geometry around simple shades. It can be particles, it can be other geometry, it can be voxels, like many opportunities. And here, this is the setup, how it looks. So when you apply the volume builder, by default, it creates the spheres, like the voxel spheres. But the density, it looks like we're missing some density. So we can go to the connect object. So by default, it was 0.1. So this is how it looks. And you can increase the density by going to 0.5. That's it, we're getting somewhere, or even to 1. So the density would be like this. This looks a bit weird, so I'll go to 0.5. What we can now do is to smooth the transition between one voxel and another. And here we have the SDF smooth setting, which can be, found here. We go to dilate. And by dilating, we can actually increase the size of this mesh. And then we smooth it one more time with an iron. And that's what you get. And by finalizing the volume builder, we put it inside the mesher. So basically all the voxels we just created with this amazing density, we create actually geometry. So if you have a look at this, it actually generates polygons around it. So now we can get back to our camera. I'll save the scene. I will disable this just to show you the idea. So this is the simulation I created. As you can see, we have some ropes being attracted to each other, and there are also clone objects, in my case, spheres, attached to the lines. And it all, comes together. So if I zoom back like this and activate the sweep object, you can see it actually generates geometry around it. Go here, back to the Redshift render view, and this is what you get. This looks pretty cool. Now we can get to our camera and get pretty nice bokeh here. And that was the moment when I looked at this scene and I felt that we had these pretty dark regions. I wanted to bring more reflection into it. So what I did, I created the volume around it. I put it in measure. So it will take a moment to generate it. And we click the render button one more time. So it usually takes a moment just to process the image. And now it looks pretty interesting because we have the depth in color, we have very cool reflections, we have some thickness, and it looks more organic and real. So that being said, how about if I show you how you can create it? So I go to the Finder, those are the scenes. As you can see, I have a lot of copies. I always like create backup copies because you never know when you want to go back to the iteration you made before, yesterday, the day before yesterday. So I'll take this, and this is what we have. So the simulation was made out of simple lines in Cinema 4D. I put them in the cloner objects. So this is the spline. You can now put it in the cloner, apply the rope tag. How you do it, you go to this settings, you go to simulation tag, and you can choose from like many cool settings. In my case, I used rope. And here you can actually choose the setting. By default, the rope diameter is 0.5, but I decided to go to a quarter of a centimeter to get finer details. And if I click the simulation button, this is what you get. So this was achieved, first of all, with Attractor. Attractor is one of my favorite tools because it actually works like a black hole. You can suck things in, but if you invert it, you can actually explode things. Like it can explode or implode. And if you don't use the spherical fields, this is what you're gonna get. It's gonna look pretty wild. Can you see? It's too strong. So I wanted to give it more delay in effects. So if you put Attractor in the sphere field, the sphere field inside the Attractor, you can actually limit the force of it by controlling the color map settings and remapping. Let's have a look. That's pretty cool. Now I also want to add the twist. And we go to rotation setting. So now it's no longer just attracts the splines, it also twists them clockwise. And you can also add some turbulence, so that would look more chaotic. So we go to frame number 0, and you can see the lights now start floating and moving in this beautiful movement. However, I would like to control the animation. I don't want the animation to start from this particular frame, and I want the simulation to be slightly slower. So what we can do, we put the cloner object inside the connect object, which is a pretty cool thing. You select it, and that's what I was talking about. You hit the bake as Alembic. It will take a moment just to export it on your drive as an Alembic file. Boom. And now we can just disable it. You don't even need all of that anymore. You just leave the lines. We save the project again. That's what you get. All right, and now we can go to this simulation setting and go to the offset. What if I want the animation to start not from 0, but from this moment? All right, we're getting somewhere, but it's too quick. The next one will be, we go to the speed. And go down to 50%, so it's half of the speed. And now we can see it starts moving much slower. It looks pretty nice. What if we go even slower to 25% of the normal speed? And the first state of the animation, let's say it will be here. minus 200 frames. So there is no like rocket science. I don't do any like complex things. It just happens very quickly, and you know, it's like a sandbox in Sim 4D. You can have so much fun just by playing with standard simulation tools. Perfect. In my projects, I showed you before, we had also some spheres, like small particles attached to the splines. We can create the sphere. By default, it's 100 centimeters. We go to, let's say, to 1. Even smaller to 0.5. And we can go and put it inside the cloner. The cloner will, what it does, it makes clones for your geometry. However, the best practice for me is to not use just the general instance, because that would create the copies of your polygons, and that would make your scene even heavier. So you can go to the render instance. That would create instances of the sphere, like by faking the geometry. And with this, you can get away with so much geometry in Sim 4D. And by default, it's grid. But if you change to the objects, we can now put it and attach it to our connect object. And this is how it looks. Now we have the spheres being connected to the splines. How about we make it look more intense, go to 50. The spheres, however, are a bit too large, so we can go to 0.5, like this. And I stand here and I feel that the spheres look too uniform. I can go to the mole graph, and we have a effector. Just apply the random effector, like this. And I want the random effector only affects the size of my object. So I will disable the position and enable the scale. Now we have more variation in size of our particles. How about we make the size even smaller, 0.15, like this. Beautiful. And increase the number to 100. Let's get back to the first frame and simulate it. That looks pretty cool. How about if we make the particles also move along the splines, not just being attached to the vertices? What we can do, we can go to the cloner, and this is what you can control here. You can control the offset. So let's say we'll go to 21st, like this. And I take the offset setting. By default it's 0. We can go, let's say, to 5. And we can change the animation. By default it is in, so it's kind of speeds up and then slows down by default. So we can just change the shape of our keyframes to linear, and the animation will be linear with the constant velocity and speed. Now the splines, the particles start moving slightly, but it's not even visible. What we can do, go back to our cloner object and increase the speed by, I don't know, let's go to 20 and try to, all right, now the particles start moving along the splines a bit quicker. What if we increase it to even 40? All right, now you can see the particles kind of like travel through the simulation. Maybe it's a bit too quick. We can go to 30% and change the offset variation, because now it's too predictable. I would like to bring a bit more variation in it. So offset variation would be like 5. Now the particles can slightly zoom, speed up, can slightly slow down, sometimes collide, go into each other. And this is what you get. Pretty nice, neat. Let's go to 50, increase the number of them. That's it, that's how it's done. Now I think it's time to play with actual geometry. Go to our connect objects, go to the spline. I would like to make the spline and geometry around the simulated elements. And we can do this with a sweep object, where we just put circle and our generated splines inside of it, and that's what you get. And now, as you can see, I look at this and I can see we have like breaks in our vertices. It doesn't look right to me, and we can actually fix it in post. You know, it's a favorite phrase of my clients. We'll fix it on post, yeah, in post, like later. And we can jump into the spline of our simulated and baked Alembic file and change the type from linear to cubic. And that's what you get. You can see now the spline has some rounded shapes. It kind of makes intermediate points inside the simulated one. Pre-baked. And now it looks nice and smooth. Perfect. All right, how about if I show you how we simulated particles? I think that would be even cooler. We go here. I go to the desktop, Maxon setups, and we have the particles. So by default, I decided to use the sphere as the source for our file. And if I hit the play button, we now simulate smoke in Cinema 4D. And this is GPU based. So it's simulated pretty quickly. What we can do now, I don't want to play this simulation each time and simulate it from the first frame. I go to the Pyro objects and I'm just going to cache this object. I just click the cache scene. It asks me to create the VDB sequence. I say yes, why not? Do it for me. It'll take a moment. Perfect. And now we can see that our simulation has just been baked as a VDB sequence, and you can just play it like this. But in my simulation scene I showed you before, we didn't have smoke. We did have particles. So what we can do, we can hide the Pyro objects like this. Go to simulate, let's say, create the emitter, mesh emitter, and then once the particles originate from the same objects, from the same sphere, I go to the sphere object, put it in geometry like this, and I say, I want particles, I want you just to follow the smoke, like to be advected by smoke. So the smoke will define your movements and your velocity. So I say, how about if you don't move, just inherit any settings of the smoke. So that's why I disable the speed. And now what you can do, you can go to your simulation properties in Cinema 4D, go to modifiers and jump and take Pyro advect. So now the particles will try to find your simulated smoke and use it for advection. So, however, now we can see that the smoke has been simulated, and if we don't disable turbulence, this is what we're going to get. So the particles move too quickly and they still inherit turbulence. I'll just disable turbulence and leave only the Pyro advect. Now the particles move along the smoke. So if I show it to you, you can see the green dots, which are the particles, are now connected to smoke. How about if we increase the number of particles from 100 to 10,000 to make it look more nice and more visible? As you can see, the particles are now advected by smoke, and it's done literally in seconds. We just disable the Pyro. The sphere, I don't like it. We also hide it from the camera and just leave the particles. That's it. How about if we use not 10,000 but 100K? And we will still have some solid performance here. And now particles kind of exploding. The next thing, I would like to change the uniform color, and you can play with ramp, with gradients. What you can do, you can go to the simulation tool of Cinema 4D, go to modifiers, and choose the color mapper. So now these modifier will define the color of your particles. As you can see, now it's no longer just green color, it actually has some flavor. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make, I will tell Simba 4D, I would love my particles which are just emitted to have green color. Then I want them to transition to yellow, for example, more like to lime, so this kind of nice color, and then to cyan turquoise, yeah, light blue, just like that. Now we save the scene, you know, it's never late, and that's what we get. However, we can see that throughout the animation we have more blue color than yellow, and we would like to kind of control it so we can change the H upper parameter from 30, which will actually define the end of the transition of our gradients in colors. And now we can see that it takes much more time for the animation of the gradient to complete. That looks pretty cool. All right, what about if we change not the H parameter? There's a very cool parameter which I love the most, which is velocity. So basically, velocity tries to detect where the particles move the quickest, and that will define the color of the applied, you know, gradients. We go to the magnitude from X, and we slightly go down in the upper. We want to have a bit more transition here. So now it has some liquid, you know, appearance. And literally it all happens in just real time. Go to 145, here we go to 25, and you can just adjust the velocity of your particles on the fly and on the go pretty quickly. However, before baking the particles, I would like to increase the number of them, because in my previous project I showed you 9 million, not more 100K. So I don't want to, you know, just take this. We'll go to, let's say, 9 million. We add one more zero here and one more. So now we have 9 million. That's pretty cool. Let's go to the frame number 0. And now it looks pretty dense. If I zoom in, we'll be able to see all the particles in one simulation. Pretty neat. So let's stop here, save the scene, and go to our particle group. Particle group actually contains all the information about the particles, the velocity, the color, the turbulence. All of that is actually contained there. So now we want to cache the object. It will create a new Arabic file which will contain all the information, like data. I'm not a software developer, engineer, but this is how it works. So we go, let's call it particles_2, save. And this will take a moment. You can see the progress bar moving left to right. And here where we can talk about life, reflect on things, maybe have a cup of coffee. It will take a moment. We need some background music, like 3 eternity later. Nice. And now we can play it. That's pretty cool. And now we can actually play back the animation and see all the colors transitioning in this beautiful motion. Like I mentioned before, what you can do, you can go to your particle group and change the speed. So by default it's 100, so I go to 50. That's pretty cool. However, because I made the speeds like slowed down, it takes more time for the particle simulation to complete within the 50 frames. So what we can do, let's go to 250. Now our sequence is like 10 seconds if it's 25 frames per second. We go to frame 0 and say the offset I want the particles to start moving from this moment, like this, 50, and the speed, let's decrease it even more to -15. So now we can have some art direction. And now particles move nicely and slowly. I'll just zoom in. That's pretty cool, yeah? How about to render these particles? So now we go to the Redshift. I have already created the particles, like material. Now we just need to put it on top the particle group. Let's go save the project, go to Redshift, render view, and go from 4K to 720p, just for some faster preview. It will take a moment. Amazing. So now we have the particles. As you can see, the particles suddenly change color, because by default it was green and blue. Now it's more pinkish. And the particles are a bit too large. What I would like to do is to go to the Redshift render tags, go to Redshift objects. I can now change the size of my spheres. So from 0 to 0.1. It will take a moment. So now we can see the particles have smaller size and the color is different suddenly. It is because I made the custom color for the particles. So the particle material by default creates this node called color user data, and it picks up the color attributes from our simulation. But what we can do is almost like in After Effects or Photoshop, you can create the color correct node just like this, connect the output of our particles color and connect it with our material. Now we use another node which will control the color of our particles. It will take a moment. Now it's green and blue, and here's the hue shift. Now you can actually control the color, the intensity, saturation, and all of that is happening in real time. You can change the contrasts, the saturation, you can go wilds. This doesn't look nice, so we go to 0.1. This is how it looks. Let's say I will stay here and reduce the contrast of the particles. This looks very nice. Now we go back to our camera. So I will create a new camera. Why not? Go here, select the camera, and let's add some bokeh and depth of field here, because depth of field is the king. You activate the bokeh and the aperture by default, which is 8. You can go to 0 and change the focus distance. You just take this, click this one focus distance, and with this puppet, you can actually control the focus distance. However, if you mess something up, you can always use this slider and change it by hand. This is how it looks. And the moments I told you about the bokeh, maybe like 30 minutes ago, you can go and change the circular, which is just rounded bokehs. You can go to blade it, change the aspect ratio to anamorphic to 0.7, and increase the intensity of the borders of your bokeh by increasing this setting, which is spherical aberration. This will increase the brightness of your bokeh's borders, which is pretty useful for like different certain cases. You can go wild to 100, to 50, to 70. You can change the aspect ratio, stretch it, make it look like there is some vertical movements, motion in those. How about if we zoom in closer to show all the details in our particles? And as you can see, now it's kind of like stretched, it's too much. So I'll change the aspect ratio from 0.16. I'll bring it back to 0.7, and spherical aberration will be 1.2. Just Nothing too crazy. And I would like to zoom a bit closer on this part of the simulation, in the very center of our composition like this. And how about we try to render it right now in the Redshift IPR view. We go up from 720p to 1080p and try to render it now. You click this bucket render, and now we just witness the beauty and try to, cross the fingers, nothing, breaks down in the moment, in the process. So it's already 33%, which is pretty fast, pretty quick. This is how it's usually done in Cinema 4D. In my case, I use cloth simulation or rope, and also smoke, because I work a lot with like beauty brands, and this is something which you can use in like brands like L'Oreal, Dior, where you have the perfume, like the little beautiful bottle, and there's some smoke happening around it, swirling around the bottle with some golden particles, sparkles. So that's pretty much it. So it took us 41 seconds to render this out, which is a pretty nice performance for this particular scene. Yeah, I think we can now slowly wrap up. Yeah. Actually, before you leave, I'll just let you know, I'll be at the demo station for 30 more minutes. I will try to create some stuff, so you'll be able to see a bit more. So before I leave, I'll show you the scene I created last time I was at the booth. Something I made maybe in 30 seconds. So there's a demo station. We have, how about if I take this one? Let's see. Here, actually, I created some hair simulation as well. So same simulation, as you can see, same technique, but the parameters of the turbulence are a bit different. You can see the splines kind of make knots. They stick to each other because of the stickiness setting. So by default 0, but if you increase it to 1, you can see how the splines that start connecting to each other like spider web. On top of that, I also created the hair simulation, which looked like this. That was pretty quick. Yeah, I made this simulation, I don't know, maybe in 30 minutes. So I'm going to show a bit more at the demonstration. So thanks for coming. I'll show you the last slide for those who is a bit impatient to leave. Have some glass of water. Those are my credentials. Yeah, please follow me. Thanks to the guys at Maxon for these amazing products. Thanks for having me here. I'll be at demonstration soon, so I can answer your questions there. Thank you.